Library Association and Association of Indian Law Libraries. I welcome you all in the fifth webinar of ILA series. I would like to brief about our previous four webinars. ILA organized first webinar on combating COVID-19 pandemic, perspective role of libraries as means of free flow of information on 6th May 2020 with special address by Professor J.P. Singh Jurel, Director, InfluNet. ILA, in association with Association of Indian Law Libraries, organized its second webinar on best practices and innovative series during national lockdowns, trend issues and challenges for academic institutions and libraries on 10th May 2020 with special address by Professor Dr. Vijendra Kumar, who is a Vice Chancellor with Maharashtra National University, Nagpur. In its third in row, ILA in association with Mumbai University College Library Association organized next webinar on future of libraries on 20th May 2020 with special address by Professor Dr. Rajan Velukumar, former Vice Chancellor Mumbai University. After that, on 14th May 2020, ILA invited Padam Shri Professor Dr. Dinesh Singh, Chancellor with Mangalam University and former Vice Chancellor University of Delhi, for delivering addresses on reimagining the libraries for the 21st century. And my dear friends, today, Indian Library Association in association with HLA, Haryana Library Association, and AILL, Association of Indian Law Libraries, is going to organize its fifth webinar on embracing the future, transitions in higher education, which is very timely and thought-provoking theme. For the kind note of our participant today, the webinar is being graced by his kind presence by Professor Indra Veer Malhan, sir. He is Dean Academics and Dean School of Mathematics, Computers and Information Science. Sir is also the head of the Department of Library Information Science and in charge librarian at Center University, Himachal Pradesh. We earnestly thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation and taking out your precious time for addressing the participant who joined on the web platform. Today, we also have Dr. Jivesh Bansal, a librarian, Punjab University, Chandigarh, as first invited talk. Today, we also have Dr. Akhanand Shukla, Associate Professor, DLIS at Central University of Tamil Nadu, as a second invited talk. On behalf of ILA, HLA, and AILL, I also welcome Dr. Jivesh Bansal and Dr. Shukla on this platform. With this introductory note, I would like to express my introductory remarks with brief point about education system in India. The education system of ancient India was regarded as a source for the knowledge, tradition, and practices that guided and encouraged humanity. Universities in ancient India like Takshila, Nalanda, Vallabhi, Vikramshila, Udantapuri, and Jagaddala were witnessing of high educational culture at this time. At universities managed at that time, all these universities were managing good libraries for their students. We just discussed the example of Nalanda University. The Nalanda University had a huge library with a collection of valuable manuscripts and served over 10,000 students from India and abroad. Nalanda University Library was the biggest in Asia at that time. The Nalanda University had three buildings for library known as Ratan Doha, Ratan Sagar, and Ratan Ganjak, having multi-story building. After implementation of British education system, English culture, a new renaissance began during British Raj. Dear friends, now in 2020, we are experiencing a different scenario where the education system needs totally reformation to cope with future challenges. However, in current situation, the future of Indian universities signifies actually it depends upon its ability to harness individual, institutional, and corporate philanthropy for the purpose of higher education. With this note, I invite Dr. N.S. Shokeen, sir, who is the president of Haryana Library Association, to welcome the guests and present dignitaries. My invitation to Dr. N.S. Shokeen, sir. Dr. Arjun, please unmute, sir.
I'm audible?
Yes, sir. Now you are audible, sir.
A very good evening to all of you. I welcome you all to this fifth webinar of ILA in collaboration with Haryana Library Association and Association of Indian Law Libraries on the topic Embracing the Future, Transition in Higher Education. I, on behalf of Haryana Library Association, would like to congratulate the ILA team for conducting series of informative sessions for the LIS professionals during this period of pandemic. And I also thanks ILA team for associating Haryana Library Association in the present webinar. In my opinion, today's topic is very much appropriate in the present scenario as it highlights the challenges and opportunities in higher education which have brought drastic changes in delivery mechanism of sources and services in libraries, and it has brought us to a crossroad of survival or perish with regard to adoption of technology. Though we as librarians have effectively propounded the concept of technology integration in higher education, and to a large extent, we have gained success also. But COVID-19 has made it imperative to realize the importance of technology in classroom and virtual arena also. Therefore, librarians have to rediscover and redesign their roles, responsibilities, and service delivery patterns. The future will be blended in nature, physical as well as digital. Our preparation in terms of digital skills, management of digital operations, and logistics will prove to be pillars of growth. With these words, I'm not going deep into the topic as we have experts to deliberate on the issue. I warmly greet and welcome today's keynote speaker, Professor Ivy Malan. Welcome, sir. And invited speakers, Dr. Jivesh Bansal and Dr. A. Shukla to this webinar, and office bearers of Haryana Library Association and Association of Indian Law Libraries team, and all the participants. Here, I would like to put on record that Dr. Owen Chobe, Dr. Pradeep Rai, Dr. Priya Rai, Dr. Akash Singh, Dr. Sonam, and Dr. Arjun have been making sincere efforts for all the webinars organized by ILA, including the present one. I hope we all will be enlightened through this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for your welcome address. Now I invite Dr. Rupesh Gaur, General Secretary HLA and the Vice President of Indian Library Association, to highlight about Haryana Library Association. And I also request Dr. Gaur to also introduce our guest, Professor Ivy Malan. Dr. Gaur, please.
Thank you. Respected Sri Ivy Malanji, today's keynote speaker, Dr. B.D. Kumbarji, President ILA, and our senior professional colleague, Dr. D.V. Singh ji, and Dr. N.S. Shaukin ji, President of HLA, Dr. Jivesh Bansal, Dr. Shukla, spokesperson of today's webinar, Dr. N. Chobe ji, General Secretary ILA, Dr. Priya Rai, Dr. Akash, Dr. Ajay Arora, Dr. Arjun, and Dr. Sono, and other professional colleagues and all participants. Good evening and warm welcome to all of you. Being a General Secretary of HLA, I am thankful to ILA for conducting this webinar in collaboration with HLA. Hence, it's my privilege to introduce you to the activity of HLA. Haryana Library Association is the most of the largest and most renowned professional association in the field of library information science in Haryana. Its root can be traced back to the year of 1966. The first Haryana Library Conference was held at Kurukshetra University, Kurukshetra. Until now, HLA has organized more than 30 national conferences and about 20 state level events. The association consists of more than 600 members and is increasing day by day. It was only due to the efforts of HLA that led to framing the Public Library Act in Haryana state in 1989. We have been working for the past several years to improve the conditions of the library and professionals in Haryana. This is our core objective and we are on it. Now, let me acquaint you with the today's guest. First of all, I introduce today's keynote speaker, Professor I.V. Malan ji. He is a Dean and Dean Academic, Dean School of Mathematics, Computers, Information Science. He is also heading the Department of Library Information Science and in charge librarian of University Library System of Central University of Himachal Pradesh. He is also a member of the Academic Council and Executive Council of University. Professor Malan is decorated academicians and has held many positions in various academic bodies like Board of Studies, Research Advisory Board, and national level committees of the universities, state machineries, academic bodies, etc. He is a global world scholar whose contribution in academic publication is outstanding. He has, to his credit, many research articles, theses, conferences, publications, etc. He has been on the roll of various international and national agencies for upliftment of library and information science professions. Professor Malan is a fellow of Society of Information Science. He is a recipient of the IASLA Librarianship Development Grant USA in 1989 and Fulbright Fellows in Library and Information Science in 1996 to 1997. He received Goethe Institute grant to attend IFLA presidential meeting in Germany in 2008. He was awarded the Kola Ranganathan Gold Medal Award, ILA Nindwani Deshpande Award, Tatkal National Award, Harish Chandra Shushila Chandra National Award, ILA Natija Award, etc. Now, I officially welcome you, sir, and express our thanks for accepting our invitation. And it is a matter of pride to have you among us, sir. Welcome, sir. Now
Dear professional colleague, okay. Are you able to listen to me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Dear professional colleagues, good evening. In the first place, let me thank the Indian Library Association, the Haryana Library Association, and the Indian Association of Law Libraries for inviting me to deliver this keynote. And it's always a pleasure to talk to my professional colleagues. Friends, as you all know, this COVID-19 has put our life out of our work routines, out of our workplaces, and it has affected each one of us and our institutions, our governments, not only our country, all over the globe it has affected, and higher education is no exception to this. In the higher education, I have seen during my association, during last 4 decades, I have never seen such disruption in the delivery of education and conduct of research. Both students and teachers, they are confined to their homes, and the university facilities, colleges, they are idling. So in this pandemic, it's a time for serious thinking. It's a time for introspection. It's a time for learning a lesson. How do we plan our future course of action, our future higher education infrastructure, so that our higher education infrastructure is more adaptive, it is more buoyant, and it's more workable in such situations. It's more responsive to all disruptions so that the education delivery continues even during the periods of disruptions. Because we can't afford that our students are idling, our teachers are idling. Higher education institutions around the globe, they are redrafting their plans, how they can make and increase outreach to their students, and how they can conduct activities in connectivity with their friends and with their students, so that the continuance in research and education goes on. For example, the University of Arizona has come up with a global university campus, and they are connected with their international students from 73 locations in 32 countries, and providing access to education to them through those campuses. So the process is going on. But generally, I have seen that the well-established full-time institutions, they looked at the online education as a disdain, and they have considered as a threat to their institutions whenever there is a growth of e-learning and growth of online platforms. But now the online education, they come to their help. So both online as well as the traditional education, these are required in the present scenario. We have seen the statistics that the online education platforms has grown. One positive side of the COVID-19 is that it has brought the awareness of the online resources. It has increased the level of awareness of both teachers as well as the students. It has also brought to the surface the n number of tools, educational technologies which were not previously used. They are now increasingly being used. So that means in future, the students and teachers will be using those. A report of the Class Central shows us that courses like online courses run by the online platforms, for example, Coursera, their enrollment has increased substantially during the last few months. For example, Coursera has 10 million course registrations from 15th of March. And there were 45 million sessions, online sessions with Coursera from 15th of March to 13th of April. And its online Alexa web ranking suddenly grew from 444 position to 266 position. Today I checked. So just imagine that how much online learning activity is going on with the help of such kind of e-learning resources. Similarly, EDX is another resource which is available, and there are 19.2 million sessions were there with EDX in the month of March itself. And there was 57% increase from the month of February, and further increase is going on. That means students are learning, they are getting connected to the online resources, they are finding alternative ways of how to continue their education in the present scenario. And one another positive side is that online platforms and the technology providers, the educational technology providers especially, they have made tools either free of cost or at a discounted rate during this period. For example, Google Meet is free for 100 users for 24 hours up to at least up to September 2020. Similarly, I came to know, I talked to my colleagues in Dharamshala, they say that they have made available one platform by Cisco, and that is WebEx, which they are using for teaching classes from their homes, and their students are connected through this platform. The Zoom platform, which we are using now for this interaction, is also free. So that means this kind of technologies, they will be increasingly used for connectivity, for sharing ideas, for teleconference, for meetings in future, and rather they will be more economical mode, because we need not have to travel from one place to another place. They'll save our time and they will save our energies also. Still we can interact. In addition to that, a number of innovations are also witnessed in the online education programs. For example, Coursera itself has launched a match a service kind of service, wherein you can match your own courses with the Coursera courses and find out what is common with Coursera and what is relevant to your courses, and identify those courses, and for register, you can register for those courses. Coursera has also announced that later on in this year, in 2020, they will launch Live2 Coursera, wherein they will integrate all Zoom lectures into organized content. And this will be reusable content, so the people can listen to the recorded lectures, and it will be available with Coursera in the organized form. So these innovations, they will be helpful in the future. But at the moment, right now, when we look at the higher education, the issues like the quality of education, the issues like accessibility of education, the issues like making available our education, which is globally competitive and locally relevant, all the issues are now coming to back burner. The issue of providing online connectivity and getting connected to students, the issue of delivery of education during disruptive times, this is coming to forefront. So in this kind of scenario, the educational planners, they will have to plan for the future, but what kind of developments will take place in the future, and how can we make the education more deliverable in such situations. In the future, we would like to have the blended kind of learning platforms, blended kind of learning facilities, which will involve both class teaching, where physical space is involved, as well as the online platform. Depending upon that, how much content is to be in the online platform, how much content will be in the. Students can also register for online courses and can earn credits. And also, as far as the creation of infrastructure is concerned, we will create both physical infrastructure as well as the virtual platforms, depending upon what level of requirements are there. So the education will be more student. The post-COVID, we will see that really the things like that, going to the college for just graduation, that will come under threat, because students will be looking for the courses based, which are more competency based, which can ensure their livelihood, which can them in the hyper competitive world. So in this kind of scenario, we will have to develop a student-centric education. In the student-centric education, the students are well aware, rather more aware of their parents and their teachers, that what course of action they want for registration of courses. So they will make their own choices, but the students will play a delivery of education role. The students will, teachers will play the supervisory role, and students will even participate in interactive classrooms, and they will interact with the students, deliver their ideas to teachers, and teachers will also be learners. So in this kind of interaction, the education process will be interesting, amusing, and engaging. Already the things like flipped classrooms, they are coming up. The things like project-based learning, the internship-based learning, they are all being integrated with the education. But students will be given more choices for selecting their courses. They can register for courses whatever way they want, but they will have to learn the core courses. So they will have a choice. The departments in the universities will also encourage the students from cognate disciplines to register for their courses, and will encourage students from, for example, a student in the library science can go for registration for a database course in the IT department, and a student in the IT department come to library science department for registration of a course on information literacy. Students from MBA department can go to the library science department for a course registration on knowledge management. And student from library science department can go for course registration for financial management in the MBA department. So education departments will become more porous, and there will be more flexibility in the delivery of education. And then we are likely to have hybrid degrees, because multiple skills will be required for employment in the job market. The number of hybrid degrees will grow. In addition to that, the universities will allow students for credit transfer from one institution to the other institution. And so there will be whole flexibility in the delivery of education. At the center of this flexibility, we will have customized degrees, we have choice-based credit system, we have hybrid degrees, and we will have more personalization and outcome-based education. This growing personalization is not only in the field of education. Almost the greatest impact, social impact of technology on society is that personalization of computing power. With the iPads, laptops, and smartphones in our hands, the computing power is almost personalized. Similarly, content creation is also personalized with the development of blogs. And with the growth of social media and social computing, our networking is also personalized. With the TikTok videos, video clip making is personalized. Our music is personalized. So everything is getting personalized. At the center of this is smartphone, which will also play a crucial role in the delivery of education, particularly in accessing the educational resources. For example, all these Wikipedia, the genome database, WordCat, they're all available on the LAX database. They are available on the mobile phone. And when the students, they learn in the medical colleges and professors teach, the students get connected to the Medline database and they verify the facts what the professor is teaching. This makes the evidence-based learning and also the interactive mode of learning with the professors. And previously, 2 decades back, they were just the passive receivers of information. So this kind of scenario, we will find that education will be more interactive and learning outcomes will be more participatory. In addition to that, we have to revisit, I think we will have to revisit our Gurukul kind style of education, wherein we will have to take some ideas from there, because value-based education will also be important. Why I say value-based education? Because our society has challenges like spurious drugs, environmental degradation, violence against women, food adulteration, number of issues are coming up. So we require to pick up some ideas from our Gurukul style to make good human beings. And Gurukul ideas doesn't mean that कि हमने किसी का टिंड करा देना और बोधी रख देनी. इसका मतलब ये है कि उसको हम कैसे मॉडर्न एजुकेशन के साथ इंटीग्रेट कर सकते हैं. We may also require to revisit our moral philosophies and find out how can we make good education and integrate them with our educational programs for human making. And human making courses will also find a place in our curricula, because the holistic development of a student, a learner, that will come to the focus. It will involve courses like stress management, time management, information literacy, yoga, so that we can completely prepare a student for the challenges of life. And also there are debates that when there is online platforms are growing, e-learning is growing, what role of teacher will be left in higher education in the future? Let me say that no one became engineer or a doctor by self-learning. So role of a teacher always remain very crucial in guided learning, in participatory learning, and also teacher is at the central place for capacity building, for adding value to the individual capacities and capabilities. A teacher's role is to convert the human beings to human resources. So teacher not only teach, they also inspire, they also guide, they also provide emotional first aid to the students and also supervise their learning. And when teachers, they they inspire students, the students excel. The role of a teacher is simply to pick up the diamond kind of material from the dust and make them shine. But teacher will not be a traditional teacher in the future. The teacher will also have to continuously learn and upgrade their knowledge, because their knowledge will have a ripple effect on their students. And one time learning at a university or at a college will not be sufficient for students too. They have to continuously learn through short courses so that they can compete in the hyper competitive world. They have to upgrade their skills, and debates are also will start like that. What will be the expiry date of degrees? So that up to what level of period we can have certification for a student, that his knowledge is sufficient to deliver for 10 years, for 5 years, for 20 years. So then they have to come back to the or upgrade their knowledge through short courses. Platforms like Future Learn, they're also coming up where short courses are being provided through online media. And since this talk is about uh, embracing the future, let me quote from, with my conclusion, a quotation of Alvin Toffler from Future Shock, from his book Future Shock, that Johnny must learn and anticipate change, and so must Johnny's teacher. So to anticipate what changes are likely to take place in future and learn, this is more important both for the teacher as well as the students. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for your valuable and thought-provoking address and giving emphasis our various online courses like Coursera and other platform. And sir, it is very much sure that future is based on online courses to be adopted by most of the universities in future. And you are very much correct that the role of teachers would always remain valuable in this format too. With this note, I invite Professor B.D. Kumbar, President ILA, for delivering presidential address.
Good evening, all of you. Dr. N.A. Shokeen, the President of Haryana Library Association, and the office bearers of the Haryana Library Association. Dr. Indraveer Malan, the today's main speaker, Bansal and Dr. Sukla, the other resource persons of today's webinar, Dr. D.V. Singh, Pradeep Rai, Dr. Chobe, Dr. Arjun, Dr. Akash, Dr. Priya, our coordinating team, the more than 500 plus the participants of this webinar. Once again, on behalf of the Indian Library Association, I welcome the team of Dr. Shokeen, Dr. Priya Rai, and the speakers of today's webinar. So as we are all aware, that is about the COVID-19 and its impact that is on the education system. So of course, as we are all observing, during last almost 2 months, our educational institutions, including our libraries, are closed. Every day, students from different corners of the country, they are calling, they are asking, sir, what is happening? When the universities are going to be started? When our classes are going to be started? When our examinations are going to be conducted? So these are all the questions. So for which, yes, we are aware the COVID-19 is mainly responsible for this. At the same time, we must have to remember we are not sitting idle. Our students are also not sitting idle. Even our library and information science professionals are also not sitting idle. We are all quite busy. So the personal the contact is not there between a teacher and a student that is in the classroom, but we are conducting the online classes that is for our students. Of course, in the Indian context, only our students, they have to give the feedback, whether the online classes, they are on par with the regular classes, or some changes are going to be made. It is only after the receipt of the feedback that is from our students who will be in a position to come back. Because the Indira Gandhi Open University and other universities in India, during last 1 decade, they are engaging the online classes that is for our students. So, of course, they are all employees. The employees, those they are admitting, that is for the part-time courses. It may be in the field of the information technology, computer science, management, financing, microfinancing, etc. Including our library and information science, the courses, they have been organized by the Indira Gandhi National Open University. So in fact, now we have to learn a lot. As our main speaker has been mentioned, this COVID-19, it has made us to learn a lot. So what we have to learn, what you have to introduce, how you have to introduce. So let us, we will sit together and we have to finalize everything that is for the future. So during last several decades, because as I have been already completed 33 years of my service, I have not seen the situation like this. Only during our vacation, that is only for a month, we used to be away, that is from the students. Otherwise, we used to be regularly, that is with our MPhil and PhD scholars. But today, we are all away. So we are having the contact only online. So therefore, as our Professor Inderveer Malan said, so we have to prepare for both. The whatever the changes that are going to take place. Of course, as we are studying and teaching that is in our classrooms, the developing countries like USA, Japan, and other European countries. So the most of the classes they are conducting that is only an online, but only in India. So we are conducting the regular classes, one-to-one classes. The main reason here, our students are all not well prepared. Our students, they do not have the required skills, the techniques, the knowledge, including the devices that are required to attend the online classes. So this COVID-19 is not only going to teach a lesson that is for the teachers, it is also going to teach a good lesson that is for our students also. Our students also, mentally and physically, they have to prepare very well. Whatever the changes that are going to take place, they have to accept. They have to adjust. When they will learn to accept and adjust, then only they are going to shine, that is in the future. So the students and the teachers, now it is time for us to share our ideas, share our knowledge. That is about the changes that are taking place, whether they are acceptable or not. If something is going to be modified or alterations are required, we have to sit along with our practicing library and information science professionals, because we have to concentrate that is on the market also. So if such type of the online courses are going to be introduced that is in the future, whether the employer is going to accept such type of the degrees, the students with the knowledge, the skills, because today, as we are witnessing, it is very difficult for the regular students to get an employment that is in the market. So along with the students and teachers, what we are going to teach, what they are going to learn, that is important in the future. What is important that is in the future, what the employer is expecting, that is from our students. We have to look at the employer as well as based on the employers, we have to change our curriculum, syllabi, and as I have been already told, so last 2 decades, we are continuously changing our curriculum. More than 50% of our syllabi is covered only ICT related papers, theory as well as the practicals. Our students are also well versed, that is in the use of the information communication technology, as well as they are good in handling the digital libraries, going for the library automation, networking, and they are trying their level best to provide the computer-based, the information-based, and the network-based services to the users community. But only the thing, as I am observing, that is from the students. Some of the students, they are not acquiring the required skills. As our chief guest said, the multiple skills are required. To acquire such type of the multiple skills, so they need to attend the courses like the Coursera, along with our regular, so either bachelor's degree in library and information science or the master's in library and information science. Because in the bachelor's as well as the master's in library and information science, we are not going to provide the highest, the skills that are required to survive, that is in the present scenario or in the present market. So therefore, along with the regular courses, the each and every student, so they have to undergo one or the other the courses, including the PGDLAN or the management courses. Then only they will be in a position to get the better employment opportunities that is in the market. So even our chief guest, he has mentioned that is about the role of a teacher that is in the class. So even our teachers, they have to change their attitude. They have to learn a lot. Even in my opinion, the younger teachers, if they are going to attend the Coursera classes, they too also, they will be in a position to learn. They will be in a position to acquire the highest knowledge. That is how to engage the online classes as well as how to reach the students. So as our teachers already, they started collecting the feedback, that is by using the information communication technology. Even today, our teachers, they are conducting the quiz competitions. They are conducting the online tests. So these kinds of the things are common, but our teachers, they have to learn a lot, especially during the environment like this. So when they are going to learn, then only they are going to become an effective teachers. An effective teacher is one who can help the students to acquire the highest, the theoretical as well as the practical knowledge. The another problem that is in our classrooms. So look at the learning activities of the students. Of course, during our semester system, we are testing the students by conducting the classes, by conducting the tests, either every week or once in 15 days or at the end of the month. So these kinds of the tests, they are going to help our students to learn more and more. So that is how they are involving more and more, that is in the learning activities. Come back to the higher education. So since the University Grants Commission, it was appointed several commissions to bring certain important changes that is in the higher education system. The latest one is the new education policy. But the problem here is the committees and commissions appointed by the central government of India, they are going to prepare a beautiful report. But the problem is such type of the reports, they are going to be implemented from time to time. So when they are going to be implemented, then only our teachers, the students, including the society in general, because what the society, the Indian society is expecting, that is from the higher education system in India, is that is the quality higher education. As many times I have been mentioned, it is very difficult for the universities to provide the quality higher education without the quality libraries. The library is the heart or brain of the higher education system. But once again, so the UGC, as well as the committees and commissions appointed by the government of India, they have to give the prime importance, that is for the libraries as well as the library and information science professionals. When the library and information science professionals, they are going to provide an easy access, that is to the relevant information or right information to each and every user, then only the user community, they will be in a position to get an access, that is with the right type of the information that is possible only through our librarians or library and information science professionals. Look at the role of the new information managers. Again, as our chief guest mentioned, that is about the content management. They are going to act as a content creators, content managers. So information consolidation, reconsolidation, packaging, repackaging, all such type of the activities in which our library and information science professionals, they are involving. So once again, we all of us, we have to remember the services of the Indian Library Association. As a premier library association in India, it is trying its level best to improve our library system, whether it is a physical or infrastructural library system. Even the Indian Library Association is providing, supervising, supporting, encouraging. So all types of the library and information science professionals who are working in different types of libraries. But it is a time for all of us. We have to join our hands. We have to work together. So what is most important, that is in the today's environment, is the collaboration and the cooperation. So that is how this webinar series is also organized through only the collaboration or in association with the different types of the library associations, that is at the national level as well as the state level. So I hope even in the future also, this type of the webinars, they are going to be organized many more, that is in collaboration with the different types of the library associations, just to give the benefit, that is to our LIS professionals as well as the students, including the research scholars and the faculty members. With these few words, once again I thank my organizing team, the seniors, Dr. Shokeen and D.V. Singh and others. Especially I thank Professor Indraveer Malan, who has accepted our invitation and delivered a wonderful lecture that is for more than 500 students or the participants. Thank you one and all. Over to Akash.
Thank you very much, sir, for your presidential speech. You elaborated well that we were not prepared and properly trained for online teaching, whosoever the students and the teachers. But now the academic community will take a note and would prepare for online learning in regular mode, which will prepare us to fight such type of pandemic in future. Now this is the time to introduce and invite our delegates for invited talk. Firstly, I would like to introduce Dr. Jivesh Bansal. Dr. Jivesh Bansal is acting as a university librarian for Punjab University, Chandigarh from April 2019. He has more than 21 years of experience, in which 19 years he has served to the Central Library of Punjab University. He was awarded PhD by Punjab University also in 2013 for his doctoral research on information seeking behavior in electronic environment. Dr. Bansal has published more than two dozen papers in national and international journals, and he has attended a number of workshops, international and national conferences in abroad and India. And he has also served as a resource person for various events. Now I invite Dr. Bansal to deliver his talk on the topic of the day. Over to Dr. Bansal.
Thank you, Akash.
Hello.
Thank you, Akash.
Welcome, sir.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you're good. Audible, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Akash, for your nice words. Today's my topic of talk is on accreditation of higher education institutions and programs in India. As we all know, India is one of the largest and diverse education system in world, with more than 800 plus central, state, deemed and private universities and around 40,000 colleges. The gross enrollment ratio in higher education has increased from 25.8% in 2017-18 to 26.3% in 2018-19, according to All India Survey on Higher Education. It is close to achieving a target of 30% in 2020. Now, in such a massification of higher education, two important questions arise. One is on quality of institutions, and the other on employment of graduates still exist. This is said by a report of United States-based think tank, the Brookings Institution. In higher education system, two aspects are always are discussed, that is quality and quantity. But there should be quality along with quantity. And another is quality with equity. There should be a quality and equal opportunities for all. And here comes the accreditation. Accreditation is quality assurance in higher education institutions and program. That with such a massification of higher education system, how we have to provide quality education to our higher education system. If you will see the background of accreditation of higher education institutions, it is accreditation of educational institutions began in the 1880s, but only at local level in US. National standards of accreditation were not officially established until the early 20th century. After World War II, accreditation began to play a major role in the field of higher education, largely due to this is the major breakthrough after which this accreditation in the globe at the world level started, largely due to the 1950 reinstatement of the Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944, informally known as GI Bill. The bill offered financial assistance to veterans of the Korean War to cover living expenses as well as tuition costs for higher education. This GI Bill has provided assistance to the war veterans of the World War II, as living expenses as well as tuition costs for higher education. A large number of veterans took advantage of the GI Bill and enrolled in higher education programs in institutions across the country, that is US. In response to this dramatic increase of new students, many new universities and colleges were created. However, it soon became clear to the veterans as well as to the federal government that a significant percentage of these new institutions offered program and training which were of very low quality. The federal government, realizing both the disservice being done to veterans as well as to large amount of taxpayer money being wasted, restricted the GI Bill eligibility to only those schools and universities which were recognized and accredited on a federal level. Only to the accredited institutions and programs the veterans can take admissions. A list of these accredited institutions started publishing by the US Commissioner of Education each year. This is the background from where this accreditation start at the world level, at the globe, in the globe. What are the international agencies which are working in this accreditation? The International Network for Quality Assurance Agency in Higher Education is a global association of quality assurance organizations, both governmental and non-governmental. It was founded in 1991 with 8-member organization and now has over 280 members. United States-based Council for Higher Education Accreditation, a non-government organization, maintains an international directory which contains contact information about 467 quality assurance bodies, accreditation bodies and ministries of education in 175 countries. What are the national efforts? what we consider accreditation for after our independence and establishment of University Grant Commission in 1956, which the University Grant Commission Act of 1956 explains about accreditation. Accreditation is compulsory for all universities in India, except those created through an act of parliament. Without accreditation, it is emphasized, these fake institutions have no legal entity. This is the primary level of accreditation, that any university, any private university, any state university, that should have an affiliation of University Grant Commission. This is the definition of University Grant Commission Act of 1956. These are the various other professional bodies which provides accreditation for different technical, correspondence, law, different types of professional courses, like All India Council for Technical Education, Bar Council of India, Central Council of Homeopathy. These are the various organizations acting for professional accreditation of courses. Several initiatives were taken in the end of 20th century. This is the second level of accreditation which India started in the end of 20th century, because there is no program accreditation before till date. There is very less program accreditation in India, because if you will, introduction of national eligibility test is the first prerequisite for entrance in teaching in higher education institutions in 1990. This is the first prerequisite requirement that was implemented by UGC, that if any person will enter into the higher education system in the teaching of higher education, that should be NAAC qualified. This is the first effort. Establishment of national assessment, and everyone know about NAAC, National Board of Accreditation for accrediting technical education programs in 1994. Establishment of internal quality assurance cells, which we call IQACs. But this is about NAAC. How NAAC was established, I just discussed. It was started in 1994 by the University Grant Commission. The mandate of NAAC, as reflected in its vision statement, is making quality assurance as an integral part of functioning of higher education institutions. This is the criteria of the NAAC. NAAC give accreditation to universities, to the autonomous colleges, to the undergraduate colleges, and to the postgraduate colleges. This is the curricular. These are the criteria covered. Curricular aspects, how many grading. These are the different numbers assigned to them. Teaching, learning and evaluation, research, innovation and extension, infrastructure and learning resources, student sports and progression, governance, leadership and management, institutional values and best practices. This is the NAAC criteria. And these are the grading system, which is latest effective. This is 3.51, everyone can see from this slide, and this is also available on the NAAC website. This is the NAAC accreditation of Punjab University. NAAC was accredited by NAAC in 2001 for the first cycle, in 2009 for the second cycle, and 2015 for the third cycle. This is about the NAAC accreditation of Punjab University, Chandigarh. The second one comes the National Board of Accreditation, which provides accreditation to the NAAC provides accreditation to the institutions. But if you will talk about the NBA doesn't provide accreditation to the institutions. It provides accreditation to the programs. It was initiated by this was started by the AICT in the year 1994, and NBA came into existence as an independent autonomous body with effect from 7th January 2010, and that provides program accreditation in engineering and technology, management, architecture, pharmacy and hotel management, and catering technology through the mechanism of accreditation of programs offered by technical institutions. And if I will talk about the Punjab University has University Institute of Engineering and Technology, and computer science and engineering course of that undergraduate course is accredited in 2016-17, 17-18. This provides only 3-year accreditation, and after the expiry of that 3-year accreditation, the institute has to further apply for that and further accredited for academic year 2019, 20 and 22, and this will end in 22. The computer science and engineering accreditation will end in 22, and then it will have to again reapply for the accreditation. Similarly is the case for ECE, and if you will see the case of biotechnology engineering, academic year 2015 and 16, only 2-year accreditation was provided, and later they have applied or not applied, but now the biotechnology course of Punjab University is not accredited by the NBA. Mechanical engineering is, and this electrical and electronics engineering, and this is electronic and communication and CSCR still accredited till 2022. This is the program accreditation done by the NBA. Another comes the external quality. There are two type of agencies like NAC and BA. These are the external accreditation agencies. But there is another type of agency. Internal quality assurance cells are also started as a prerequisite by the NAC and these by the external quality assurance agencies. The external quality assurance adoption of prescribed standards by EQA, and internal quality assurance promoting IQA, internal quality assurance mechanisms. There are, beside this, national networks and this international networks. There are many regional networks. Many regional networks are active in the area of quality assurance. These EQA networks contribute immensely to address concerns about quality assurance globally, like quality assurance of cross-border higher education. The European Network for, this is a body of ENQA, European Network for Quality Assurance. Arab Network of Quality Assurance in Higher Education, Asia Pacific Quality Network. EQA network helps in building trust and facilitates dissemination of information and resources across nations, because these are interstate bodies, these are interstate bodies. EQA external quality assurance system promotes curriculum coherence, improvement in teaching learning processes, and enhancement of learning outcomes. What are the duties of the internal quality assurance? Many institutions which have got accredited by the NAC in the first cycle, there was a condition by the NAC, until and unless they will not establish their IQAC cell, they will not be accredited in the second cycle. So almost all the institutes which have started, by most of the universities, they have started this IQAC cell, and many colleges also in India have started this IQAC cell. Initially, for quality assurance in higher education, focus was on external quality and accreditation. Soon it was realized that EQA purpose, because external quality assurance like by NAC, but that was also, that is in 5 years. And sometimes, like in Punjab University, accreditation was done in 2015. But now they have extended it because they have a lot of applications. Because India, as I was just talking in the starting, that India is a diverse and a very large higher education system. They have extended the accreditation of Punjab University further for 2 years, because they don't have time and resources for. They have extended the Punjab University accreditation up to 2022. IQA system was introduced in institution in order to support EQA, external quality assurance, and make quality assurance, because these internal quality assurance cells, but they are the duties. They prepare the annual quality assurance reports. They submit these reports to the NAC, and after that, after these peer review committees, etc., these NAC committee visit the different institutes for accreditation. And now the whole process of this NAC is computerized. Earlier, we have to present these reports in paper form, but now they don't accept it. There is portal-based system. We have to upload all the data on these related to NAC on the website of NAC, and there is very fine system now. NAC like bodies are developing. IQAC cells in higher education institutions collect information on quality parameters of teaching, learning, and related aspects. Various fundings. Now you all know that various fundings are linked to this RUSA funding and other funding by the DST and the ICSR. These fundings are now linked to this accreditation system. The institutes which have higher scope, they get the better funding, and the others, they don't get the better fundings. There is one body, Center for Policy Research in Higher Education. This is in the NIPA in New Delhi. They have conducted a study of Mohanlal Sukhadia University, Udaipur, shows that external quality assurance and internal quality assurance have made several positive changes in the university. There is a lot of improvement in infrastructural and physical facilities, as well as in implementation of changes as advised by peer review teams. Till date, there is no effective measures to assess the improvements in programs being offered. There is no much development in the pedagogical practices, classroom processes, etc. through internal quality assurance and internal. These are the lacunas still which are exist in this system. Next comes the ranking. The ranking system of universities started with the publication of academic ranking of all universities in 2003. This is the first efforts at the international level from where this ranking system in higher education systems was started. This was followed by Time Higher Education Ranking in 2004, based on the data collected and analyzed by, these are the some query Siemens. These query Siemens were used. In 2010, the Time Higher Education and this Canvas ranking split, and each of them started releasing separate rankings. With this, 3 ranking system came into existence. Beyond these 3 major ranking systems, there were other governments like Center for World University Ranking in 2012, Moscow International University Ranking in 2017. All these rankings are based on weightage to teaching research reputation. But purpose of all these ranking was to give a ranking of world institutions. The countries which are ranked low in these ranking systems have started national ranking system for their higher education institutions. In India also, National Institute, which we call as NIRF, launched by MHRD in 2015. Because the institutions, the countries which are not highlighting in these international ranking systems, they started their national ranking system so that they can develop the quality standards and then they can then compete with the international standards. And NIRF rank universities and colleges, technical institutions, management institutes, and pharmacy institutes separately. NIRF covers 5 areas: research and professional practices, teaching, learning and resources, graduation outcomes, outreach and inclusivity, perception. The parameters are same for all types of institutions, like different types of institutions are covered by these and like, but weightage depend on the focus of their engagement. NIRF intends to address the issue of improving the status of Indian institutions in global ranking. The purpose is the only same. India has already declared institutes of eminence, 10 public sector. We all know that India has declared 20 institutes, 10 of public sector and 10 on private. You all know the DU, BHU, Jadavpur University, 4 IITs, old IITs like Delhi. These exist in these 10 public sector institutes of eminence and 10 private like Shiv Nadar University. Another one is this Vellore Institute of Technology. These are the 10 institutes. You can check it from the Google. These are the 12 institutes of eminence. What is the purpose of it? That by focusing on the institutions, we can gain position among the top world. Basically, the purpose is same, that we can compete with the world level institutions. The focus of ranking parameters should be on diversity of Indian higher education. The massive basification of the system is also accompanied by diversity of providers and student bodies. We all know that diversity. If we see the many private university, there are educationists, there are teachers, they are from many countries, many states, and also the students, international students are there. Although ranking and developing world-class universities are important, it should not be at the cost of diversity inclusiveness, which we call that the Indian diversity should be included in institutions. If you will talk about, I will talk about the Punjab University ranking, first among universities of India and 30th in Asia. Time Higher Education Asian University ranking 2015, ranked among 1 university in India and in the bracket 276 to 300 internationally. In the Time Higher Education World University ranking, powered by Thomson Reuters, ranked 39th by the Times Higher Education among BRICS and emerging economics. Thank you, Akash. Thank you, ILA and HLA, for giving me chance for speaking, for sharing my ideas on this topic.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bansal, for giving a quick overview over the ranking systems and the other parameters for the basic basically the status of the university, how we can enhance the status of our university. Now this is the time to introduce Dr. Akhanand Shukla, Associate Professor, Dr. DLS, Central University of Tamil Nadu. Actually, Dr. Shukla is a PhD in Library Information Science and is currently working as Associate Professor at Department of Library and Information Science, Central University of Tamil Nadu, Thiruvarur, since December 2019. Prior to this, he worked as Assistant Professor at Department of Library and Information Science, Mizoram University for more than 9 years. He has published more than 70 publications in national and international research journals, conference proceedings, book chapters, and having 4 books to his credit. He is nominated as editorial board member, reviewer of more than 5 LIS journals of national and international review. He is associated with ILA, ISLIC, IATLIS professional organizations with life membership. Now I request Dr. Shukla to kindly deliver his invited talk to August viewers.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm audible?
Yeah, you're good audience.
Okay, thank you. Today, my presentation topic is that regarding MOOCs, and that is the part of higher education. And if you see, the Professor Malhan has already told that what is the dimensions of higher education, and with that dimensions, he already told that online learning and MOOCs are there. And if you see the higher education today and in the future, we can find out that a lot of changes are happening these days, and due to technological advances, universities, colleges, and schools are moving towards to use online learning through social media. So many other platforms are there. So my topic will be this MOOCs and a basic strategy to develop the e-content, and the e-content is the requirement of MOOCs. Before going to that, some highlights I want to give on the MOOCs. That it was established back in the 2008 and gained momentum and popularity in 2012 as a popular learning tool. And if you go for the details of the MOOCs, or the expression of the MOOC, that is massive open online courses. The meaning of massive is here that number of students, how many number of students can take class together. It is not only 100 or 200, it may be lakhs, 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs, like that. So a lot of mass is there to have this course. And open world means that this is the free of copyright and free of charge. Nobody can pay the fee for this kind of courses. And online means it is available freely to anyone, any corner of the world at any time. And the word courses means if you are going to learn this kind of course, you can get a kind of certificate degree or diploma or this graduate degree, like that, or postgraduate degree. So that can work. So this has renamed as massive open online courses, and in the brief MOOCs. And there are a lot of online global players for the MOOCs are there, like that Apna course. This is run in India, and Coursera is very famous. You know that Coursera is made by this USA-based company, and it is having more than 2,000 courses at a time. Another one is UDX, Udonix, Future Learn. Already Malhan sir told that Future Learn is there. iVersity, Master University, Open Learning, Udacity, Udemy, and Khan Academy. Khan Academy is providing the free courses and this learning materials to everyone. So these are the global players, and there are more numbers, more than 30-40 numbers are there, but very popularly we know 10 or 15 like that we are knowing, but many are there. And if you see the future of the MOOCs, MOOC cannot, it is one opinion that MOOC will replace the higher learning, traditional higher learning, but it is not possible. MOOC cannot replace the traditional approach for classroom teaching, but it can use an alternative method to bridge the gap between this traditional mode and this technological mode. And in various schools of learning, it can be adopted. Already Professor Malhan told that one stream students can go to another stream, and this is the beauty of higher education now. If you come to the MOOC programs implementation in India, UGC along with MHRD has developed the MOOC programs, launched the MOOC programs for higher education, bachelor's degree and master's degree, like that. And this can be taught in the regular campus classes also, beyond the online classes. Recently, in 2014, August, government has launched and announced this one platform, that is the Swayam, that is the MOOC platform, study webs of active learning for young aspiring minds. In short, we said Swayam. So this is having a more than 2,000 courses list right now. It was announced in August 2014, and beta version of this Swayam portal was launched in August 2016, and the full version in July 2017, and it is working with the 2,000 courses. If you see, it is a platform that facilitates hosting of all kind of courses, like which can taught in the classrooms from class 9 to PG courses, and it can be accessed by anyone, anywhere, at any time. All the courses are very interactive and prepared by the best teacher of the country and are available free of cost to any learner. This Swayam platform is supported by 9 national coordinators like AICT, NPTEL, UGC, CEC, NCRT, NIOS, IGNOU, IIMB, and NITTER, NITTR. So these are the 9 players are there, Indian level, 9 players are there, which are taking their role in different sectors. So these courses delivered through Swayam are available free of cost to learners. However, learners wanting a Swayam certificate, so for that they have to register for the final exam, and for that they have to pay the nominal fee, and with the nominal fee they can get they have to appear for exam and they can get the certificate. And these Swayam courses are having the credit transfer facility also. UGC has planned that every university should have at least 20% credit transfer facility with these Swayam courses. So there are, if you see that the global players and the Swayam platform, the Swayam is also providing more than 2,000 courses, and this is the one of the largest MOOC providers in the world. And the courses are started by more than 1,200 instructors, and more than 130 institutions are working behind this, like the central universities, state universities, and autonomous bodies like IITs, IIMs, IISc, like that. Coming to my point that this making the MOOC courses, we need the content, and that content should be available in electronic format. Without having a content, you cannot go for the creation of the MOOC courses. So there should be some guidelines, some strategies which you have to follow for creation of e-content. If you have the e-content, you can deliver the content through email directly to students also, and you can create the video lecture also. So what is the e-content? That is the very simple. We are knowing that electronic content, digital learning materials are known as the e-content, and these are the prevalent in electronic teaching or e-teaching. It may be born digital, e-content may be born digital, or digital conversion from print media to electronic media. And if we see the design structure of the e-content, then there is one word, smallest element of the e-content is known as the asset. We see the asset, that is the smallest element, and this asset is a single building block of the e-content. And it may be the single building block, or asset may be the animated text or a simple kind of animation. So when we are having many learning objects, we are having many assets, it makes a learning object. And assets should be arranged in the order of structured order, whatever the pedagogy is working there. So in the learning object, all the assets are arranged in a systematic way. So these many learning objects are making a learning modules. And when we are having many learning modules, we may say it a learning units. When we say learning modules, again learning modules are having many assets, and these objects are there, and learning modules are all again structured logically, including the motivational aspect of the subject, presentation of the content, and a little bit knowledgeable text and self-assessment units. If you can see the IGNOU course materials, one unit is having some text is there, some assessment exercises are there, and some definitions are there. So this is the simple example of learning modules. And when many learning modules are having at the place, this makes the learning units. And in a course, we need many learning units. When many learning units are there, it is known as a course. And a course means simply we know that this is the paper, whatever paper you are studying in a course. And when many courses are combined together, we say program. Like example, MLIS is a program. And the papers, 20 papers, 30 papers within this MLIS program is known as the 20 courses. But wrongly we are representing what course you are studying. Program name you are saying that like a course. That is the confusion is having with everyone. So I'm clearing that one. Course is the paper only, and where a teacher can teach classes for a long time, for 1 month or 1 semester, with the help of supportive techniques of e-materials. So this e-content, if you go for the e-content types, there are factual type of e-contents are there. Like these factual types are the unique, very unique type of and very specific information that answers only question like who is, what, where, when, this kind of questions are coming. So this is the factual type of information we are providing with the e-content. And these facts are shown or indicated with everyone. For example, any historical event is there, any kind of list is there, any kind of data is there. So these are the factual information. Another content type is the procedural content. So here step-by-step task has been given to for the course content. For example, mathematical calculation or problem solving on some software. If you want to enter some formula in a spreadsheet or Excel, then what is the step there? What is the procedure to enter the data there? So this kind of content is known as procedural content. Conceptual content is there where the groups of objects or entities or ideas are defined under the boundary of some words. And basically it is decision type of there. And they have some type of common characteristics like some definition or answer of some questions like, for example, what is the concept of greenhouse effect? So there will be some kind of conceptual information, definition, or some exploration will be there. Another is the process type of information where some kind of flow of events are happening in the information source. Again, the same example is coming like how the spreadsheet works. One was the step that how the spreadsheet enter the data in the spreadsheet or Excel. Another is how the spreadsheet is working there, or how this program is working there. What is the process for the calculation? So this kind of information, this kind of content is the procedure process content. With the content, we need some objectives, and each and every course content requires specific objectives to fulfill the course curriculum or course requirement. And course should have at least two main elements. First is that what is the expected level of performance, what we want to see from the audience or from the learner, that after learning the course, what he is going to learn or what he is going to know. And so this should be describe or explanation type of objectives should be there. Another thing, the learning content. What type of knowledge after learning, what type of knowledge he is going to learn, what kind of skill he is going to learn. That is the learning content is important with this objective. And beside this, some other objectives should also be there. We cannot deny other objectives. These are the objectives, the earlier two objectives are based with the course content and course objective, this course content plus course motive. And other objectives are there like this, if you are going to make the e-content or MOOC courses, this should reduce the classroom teaching. Direct classroom teaching should be reduced based on the e-contents. And we can know the effectiveness or usefulness of the course. We can track whatever the process, whatever the progress is going with the students, we can track. That kind of objective should be there with the, when we are going to develop or create the e-content. Then whatever the knowledge management is there and the training is there, that link should also be given there with the objectives. And the last is that very important, that learning should be available anytime, anywhere, any corner of the world. So our content should be available in such a format so that maximum users can get it. If you see the content creation guidelines, these are the objectives, but the guidelines. So here, there are some basic things are there which required for the content creation. So content and knowledge assessment test or exercise should be matched with the lesson objective at every step. When we are going to teach a class or we are going to make a content lecture, we know that today what we are going to delivery to the students and what they should learn. So our content should have assessment test as well as content exercises that we can check it whether whatever we delivered they have got it or not. And whatever the learning objectives we have framed, all the knowledge should be given in the content. We cannot reduce the content based on the objective that this objective is fulfilling something, so we can cut it some other thing. No, we have to include all kind of knowledge. Even sometimes obvious information should also be included in the content. It may be obvious for us because we are the expert, but it may be new thing for the any user or any learner. So if you think that it is obvious information, it should be provided to the audience or provided to the learner. And when we are making the content, there should be very familiar and variety of examples so that a learner can understand the concept with many examples. Maybe one example may not work, so another can work. And examples should belong to the learner's background. It is not too hi-fi, and we have to see that what is the level of the course of the learner, what is their background, study background, what is their. So according to that, we have to make our examples. And lessons should be classified in two parts. First is the must-know component, that is the core of the e-content. Every user, every learner, every student should know that kind of fact, that this kind of information or this kind of knowledge is very much important to know them. And another thing that nice to know components like if some side information that they can develop some interest, some kind of historical information with the same content we can provide, so they can develop the interest with that content. So this is this kind of objective, this kind of guidelines are this giving freedom and interest, generating interest to the user or learner so that they can have proper interaction with the new content. Then with this one, language precautions are also there. What kind of language we have to use when we are making the content. So basically this is the course content writer, language writing guidelines, those who are writing the content. But it is very important for everyone. So content writers writing should be direct, simple and very clear. And sentence should be very short. It should not be more than 25 words. Sentences, longer sentences are distracting the mind. When the student is going to understand the concept, after 25 or 30 words, it distracts the mind. So they may distract with the concept what they are going to understand. Jargon kind of language should be avoided from the content. We are not to use any kind of jargon. It may be difficult for them. And when we are going to create content, we have to see this content is going to be available for how many cultural background of the students, because our course is not going to be attended by only one variety of students. Multicultural audience is there, so culture specific slang we have to avoid, and examples should be avoided. It may they may feel awkward with this multicultural examples if one culture is targeted with the examples. And we have to know that when the learners are going to learn and they are not the native English speaker, so our language we have to be sensitive with this one, that our English language or English words or sentences should be very simple, because they are not the native speakers, so they can understand the concept very easily. Writing should be very simple, like we are talking with each other, So the concept can be understand very easily and very fastly with the from the users. And information language and most probably contractions like don't or we were, so it can be used because these are the formal contractions where everyone is knowing this one. And if the first time they are using, then first time you have to use abbreviations are sometimes coming. So first time you have to give the full words within bracket abbreviations, then next time you can use the abbreviation words. And we have to avoid the compound sentences very less. As minimum we can have the compound sentences. And whenever possible, we can use the colon or semicolon to break the monotony of this sentence, so that shorter sentences can help to learn very much faster. And when we are writing the content, these personal pronouns like you, we can use that you are going to learn this idea like that one. So this is giving the personal feeling with the content to the user. And during the content writing, one very important, this is guidelines that gender inclusive language you have to use or non-sexist language we have to use. Gender inclusive means if we have not to use men, in place of men we can use people. If we are saying men, it is hiding women. So this kind of gender inclusive language like man, person or individual. If sometime mankind is coming, we can use people or human beings or humanity. In case of man-made, we can use machine-made or synthetic or artificial like that. Or in case of chairman, we can say chair or chairperson or coordinator or head. So this kind of language we have to use. Content should be, whenever you find proper, appropriate, we can use bullet. So that bullet can attract. That these are the important points. And sentence should be in active voice mode, because if the passive voice mode, agent is just absent. So this is creating distraction. So sentence should be always used in active voice mode. Acronym should be spelled first in the full time, and then after that in the glossary we can provide, and next time content is coming, then we can give in the short. Then module guidelines are there with the e-content. What is the guidelines with the modules? So e-learning can be represented in several modules. One module is not possible, all the whole content or course is not possible to create in one module. So we have to make many modules, and when making the module, we have to be careful that it is going to be studied by single learner sitting at a computer screen, and no one can sit more than half an hour for audio or video lecture. So content or modules should be not more than 30 minutes or 40 minutes like that. Course writers can generate some discussion topic within the content or exercise for the e-learner to break the boring monotonous audio or this content, or to make them engage with the video. And e-content should be developed with the digital techniques. Simply Word file, PDF file or PowerPoint sometimes become boring. So if some animations are there, some PowerPoints is there, some text is there, some exercises are there, some engagement is there, it is become more interactive, it making more interactive. And content should be copyright free, so that every user can use it for their own purpose. Modules should be very short, and that's why learner will be engaged with the module. And formative assessment exercises should be provided with the e-content, so that when the course or video is finished, they can track their progress, how much they have learned with the current video or current Word file or PDF file or audio file, whatever is the content is available. The format software format of the e-content should be widely available. We have to make in such a format so that every user, every learner can adopt that model or that software very easily. They have not to go for buying any software or go for buying any downloading some special software, or some technical issues are coming. That kind of media should not be there. And duration of the content, if you go for duration of the content, some examples there. And For example, I'm taking that one credit course there. Generally, UGC has given this credit system, and if one credit is taking 15 hours of direct teaching, and the course is 4 credit, it means one course requires of the 4 credit course requires 60 hours of direct teaching, and this direct 60 hours of direct teaching means one course or one paper in any subject, any program. And by this way, if 6 papers are in a semester, it means 24 credits are there. So 360 hours are coming for the e-content duration. And if this is the 3-year program like graduation programs, and 18 papers are there, then 72 credits are coming there, and more than 1,000 hours of the classes coming there. So if the 3 hours, and according to calculation of e-content creation, 3 hours of the class can be converted into the one module of one lesson. One lesson can be converted to one module, which is having the 3 hours class structure. So by this way, one paper can have 60 hours of class, or 20 modules, or 20 lessons. And these 6 papers may have 120 modules or 1 year of the program. And if this 3 years degree program is there, then 360 modules are required for the 18 papers. So this is the calculation method for e-content development. If you want to make the course of the 3 years program, and then if it is 18 course, then at least 1,000 or more than that modules are required. When we are going to design the course design methods, some methods are there with this designing, like expository method. So it is the very simple one that requires learners to listen or read or observe the oldest observe. And this is the very common type of oldest and traditional method of instruction, where the instructor is delivering the information and learner is sitting in front of the instructor and he is asking the questions. So here the presentations, PowerPoint presentations, are these interactive lessons, images, audio, PowerPoint, webinar, virtual classrooms also can be used as the method for this expository methods. Another is that application method, where some exercises are including, simulations are there, research activities are there, and presence of tutor is very much important. Without the presence of tutor, application method type of content is not possible to deliver. Here virtual classrooms or e-lessons are the delivery methods through which we can deliver. And beyond that, we can have this role play or demonstration, where the application is there, role play is there, symbolic simulations are there, guided research method is there, or project work we can give in the application method. And the last one is the collaborative method, where the dialogue and discussions is happening between the instructor and learners. This is the latest one, and generally we say that XC moves, where the collaborative method is working. Here the instructor and learner is coming together, and they are discussing on some topic, and they are developing their own knowledge, and it can be delivered through online guided discussions or maybe some peer tutoring, where some peers are available and they are teaching to the learners. Then the course development tools are coming, where the 2 kind of tools are available. First is programming tools, through which we can make the e-content, and another is the authoring tools. For the creation of simple e-learning courses based on presentations or tutorials, PowerPoint or MS Word is there. These are simple programming tools. We can make the content. And authoring tools are the interactive e-learning tools, where text, graphics, and multimedia application is there. Authoring tools require some auxiliary softwares like Adobe Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator, Adobe Flash, or for animations like that, so that we can create a very interactive type of e-content. And when we are developing the interactive content, e-content, the text, illustrations, animations, audio, video, and many kind of elements, interactive elements, we have to include in the one place for making the e-content to make it very much interactive. When we are making this kind of course, authoring tools So requirement are there like this. Our course should be have menu-driven content. If somebody want to learn, it should not be without menu-driven, so that a user or learner can face problem. So for making the interactivity and navigation, menu-driven content should be facility should be there in the three tools. Editing facility should be there where content publisher can edit or change whenever they found. Visual programmings are required, like use of buttons, use of icons, drag and drop type of graphics should be there in the course content. And a preview facility should be there so that when ongoing developing course is going on, then we can see what is the preview. If you are going to develop the course, what will be the preview, final preview of the course. And when we come to the communication tools regarding the e-content, through which dissemination can be possible. Very common things are there: email, discussion forums, wikis, or blogs, webcasting, chat, instant messaging, audio and video conferencing. Nowadays, e-learning platforms are there like CMS or LMS, virtual environments. Moodle and Sakai are very famous for that one. So these platforms are giving the facility to create the e-content, and some e-content developing companies are also there, which are the best 10 companies are there based on content development quality, expertise, industry innovations, quality of clients, company growth, and some other features. So these 10 are the Kaineo, LN Communication, CISO, GP Strategies, Skillsoft, Pearson, LN Interactions, Tata Interactive Systems, Designing Digitally, Aptara, etc. So with this, I want to finish this strategy part, the course content, and coming to the point that Professor Malhan has said that e-content and some other aspects of the higher education, and he discussed with the transitions with higher education, and that are also making the region why the higher education is transitioning from one phase to another phase, and this
I'm
the
sorry,
move.
sir. I'm sorry, sir. I'm just interfering you in between.
Okay.
Sir, basically, some of our dignitaries have to join in another webinar. So we have time up to 5:46, and we have 2-3 speakers. And thanks. So, sir, I
Right.
request you on behalf of the organizing, kindly.
Just 1
Yes,
minute.
yes,
Just 1 minute.
Thank you, sir.
So that mediums, the pressures of the higher education is moving towards the digital world, but we cannot say that this a big change will happen in the higher education. But in future, incremental changes are coming with the online learning, which we are adopting in higher education. And with this remarks, I would like to finish my lecture. Thank you very much for ILA, AILL, and HLU, Haryana Library Association HLA, for giving me chance to discuss here some topics over MOOCs and higher education. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for highlighting your various valuable points
Thank you.
in your talk over MOOCs and developing digital learning tools, which are very much in use in today's pandemic situation. And many thanks to cover various well-established MOOCs modules like Coursera, Khan Academy, and many more. Also, many thanks, sir, for elaborating about Indian MOOCs module, SWAYAM, and its developing institution, and the process starting from enrollment to earning certificate with credit transfer information. Being a teacher, you rightly explained the way of digital content development must be done, which may be resulted in quality content output. Now, this is the time for question answer round. So before that, I just want to invite for a moment to Dr. D.V. Singh, sir, attend to give a short a message to our audience. D.V. Singh, sir, please.
You are asking me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, I just need to. I just request you to put 2 or 3 comment on today's talk.
No, it's a fine that you have organized it, but it should be succinctly presented. Should not be this long. Nobody has a time more than 1 hour to attend any seminar. As Malan said very nicely and very succinctly, all the components he touched and they are very informative. Others also were very good. But in future, please be careful. It should not go beyond 1 hour, 20 minutes because people are not so patient to listen to anybody. This is one. The other thing is, it's very good. Give the opportunity to young people as you have given this time to Suklaji and Jivesh and others, so that they come forward. They are the future of the profession and they have every right to lead us. Now we are behind them and they should be forward. And in future also, when you organize, try to accommodate the young people rather than the old people like us. We are there always. We have played our inning very nicely, and let them have the opportunity to play the inning in the profession. This is one. And another is, there should be some more regional seminars like this, so that profession should get acquainted with the new ideas and new means and methods of dealing with this new situation. These seminars are helping us in one way, that we can handle any emergency situation, such as communication lessness, or such as we cannot go one place to other place, we cannot meet physically, but the distance we have reduced. So only this much I would like to say, but again I'll underline it. The seminar should be only not more than 1 hour 20 minutes. That is sufficient. If you increase it, people will leave you and might have left you in large number of people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the nice words. Now, I request Dr. Ajay Kumar Arora to take relevant questions, three or four questions from the participant. Dr. Arora, please.
Thank you, Akash. Thank you. Sir, my first question is to Professor Indraveer Malhan, and this is a question by Dr. Anil K. Gupta, and he has he wanted to know about the role of LIS professionals post COVID-19.
Role of LIS professionals will increase. I mean, their role will not be just document management in the library. Their role will also shift to content management. Their role will shift to strategic knowledge management. Their role will also shift to outreaching the students as and where they are. So it's not they coming to the library. Their role will increase. Rather, there will be n number of opportunities to expand our roles, and also quickly step into wherever there are service gaps to put our foot into those shoes. So there are opportunities, because we are not only now providing our services on the basis of select collections and select documents limited to our libraries. We are providing our services on the basis of content also, and the n number of external sources of information which we are dealing with. Our role will also be for dealing with the data, setting up data centers, data analytic kind of services. So we can expand our role for counseling, for guidance, for knowledge management, strategic knowledge management. It is up to us, and it is up to our library schools how much opportunities we can fetch. We have ocean of information to deal with, and sky is the limit of services we can provide.
Right, sir. There is another question from Rekha Devi. I believe she is your student, and Professor Jyoti Kumar. They have mentioned that how to overcome digital divide that exists for students of rural background, and how can they will benefit from online teaching.
So simultaneously, in a country like India, we require to do many things. It is not there are several issues in higher education. So when the students in India, particularly, we have asymmetric access to education, and we have varied level of quality education institutions. One person is studying in the rural area, and other person is studying in a city like Delhi, school connected with Wi-Fi. And in the village areas, there is not even a blackboard and computer and a lab. So there is a difference. So how can we cope up with this situation? Simultaneously, we have to organize courses for different level of students in the colleges, at higher level in the schools, as well as even in the universities, so that these gaps can be bridged. For example, at the University of Jammu, 256 staff members, they were not good at computer literacy. We organized 1 month course for them also. So even teachers were coming to attend those courses. So I think we can organize courses depending upon the skills and requirements they require, and bridging the computer literacy skills. They can also be one of the course at the college and the university level.
Right. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. And another question is to Dr. Jivesh. And this question is by Praveen Kumar. And he has mentioned what is the role of library regarding the NBA accreditation, especially for polytechnic libraries. Dr. Jivesh?
He is not here.
I believe.
Yes.
Okay. So let me go to Dr. Shukla, please. Dr. Shukla, there is a question from Sanmati Jain, and this question is regarding, is MOOCs and OERs are same?
No. OER is the very simple open education resources which are freely available, but we cannot get any degree or diploma or certificate kind of degree we cannot get, and we have no any kind of credit facility with this one, but we can download it, we can learn it, we can increase our knowledge. But with the MOOC courses, we can have the degree also. We have to register, we can, the direct teacher is coming, we can learn it, but we can get degree also. So this is the basic difference with open education resources and this MOOCs.
Right. Another question is to you, and this is the last question, and it's by Rekha Devi. She wanted to know that she has completed SWAYAM course in MLISC last year, and how can the credit she had gained from that SWAYAM course that can be transferred to the master degree of the university?
UGC has given this facility that 20% credits should be transferred to the MOOC courses, from the MOOC courses to the direct our MLIS courses. And if university and department has started this, they have to include in their course curriculum through BOS and school board. And they have to validate that these courses are available. And if some students is going to get the degree from MOOC courses, and then we can accept the credit into our direct courses from any university. But if university has and department has not made such kind of rules, then definitely it is a problem for any students right now. Even university has provided, UGC has provided this facility, but university has to implement that one. That is the problem with the students. So I think this is the case of Central University of Himachal Pradesh, and Malhan sir can give more elaborate idea about this thing.
Yes, she is my student. We have a center there, and but we are not examination center there. Examination will be conducted somewhere in Filipinat or so. But if the credits are sent to our university, I think our controller of examination department will take care of that and integrate. Okay, as per the scheme of things provided to them.
Right. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. Over to you, Akash.
Yeah, thanks Ajay for nicely taken question answer round, and thanks and best wishes to you. Now I request Dr. Owen Chobe, General Secretary ILA, to deliver vote of thanks, and rather many thanks, sir, for being with us even after your health issues. Over to Chobe, sir.
Akash, just a minute. I give my very personal, sincere thanks to Professor Malan for giving such a fantastic talk, and very nicely has made us aware about the future developments. Thank you, Professor, once again to you.
Thank you, DV Singh.
Thank you, Akashji. Good afternoon, all of you. On the occasion of 5th program of ILA webinar series during lockdown period, on behalf of Indian Library Association, Haryana Library Association, and Association of Indian Law Libraries, and on my own behalf, at the outset, I would like to express my profound gratitude to the keynote speaker of this webinar, Professor Dr. I.V. Malan, Dean of Academics, School of Mathematics, Computer and Information Science, and HOD of Library and Information Science, and in charge librarian of Central University of Himachal Pradesh, for accepting our invitation and delivered keynote address Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I express my deep sense of appreciation to invited speaker of the day, Dr. Akhandanand Shukla, Associate Professor, Department of Live Information Science, Central University of Tamil Nadu, for his excellent presentation. Thank you, Shukla ji.
Thank you, sir.
I extend my sincere thanks to another speaker and council member of ILA, Dr. Jivesh Bansal, Deputy Librarian and in charge of Librarian of Punjab University, Chandigarh, for his very informative presentation. Thank you, Dr. Bansal ji. I am very thankful to Dr. B.D. Kumar, President of Indian Library Association, who has always encouraged and given us free hand to conduct this webinar series. Thank you, sir. I wish to express my hearty thanks from bottom of my heart to Dr. N.S. Shaukin, President of Haryana Library Association, Council Member of ILA and ex-Vice President of ILA, and above all my big brother, for collaboration with HLA and his welcome address. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chaubey.
Thank you, sir. I am equally thankful to Dr. Rupesh Gaur, General Secretary, HLA and Vice President of ILA, for introduction to the chief guest and introduction to HLA for his collaboration efforts and cooperation. Thank you, Bansal ji. I would like to express my special thanks to Dr. D.B. Singh, former President of ILA and ex-librarian of Delhi University. Thank you, sir, for your guidance and support. I would like to thanks to Dr. Priya Rai, President of HLA and convener of this webinar series. I thanks are also due to young and dynamic Dr. Akash Singh, Assistant Librarian NLU and coordinator of this webinar and EC member of ILA. Thank you, Dr. Akash. I would like to place my record to organizing team and coordinator of this webinar, that Dr. Pradeep Rai, Senior Coordinator and Senior Vice President of ILA, Dr. Arjun Singh, Mrs. Sonam Singh, and other team members. I extend my sincere thanks to all office bearer of Haryana Library Association like Dr. Balesh Sharma, Senior Vice President, Dr. Om Pal, Vice President, Sri Subhash Sharma, Joint Secretary, Dr. Ashok Kumar Saini, and all others of HLA. Last but not least, ILA and HLA and AILL is very thankful to all the participants who are joined this webinar from across the country. Thanks to one and all. But one announcement for next webinar. On the 20th May, this Wednesday at 3:30 p.m. in collaboration with Karnataka University, Karnataka Library Association, ILA organizing webinar at 3:30 on 20th of this month. Thanks to one and all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. One thing I just want to discuss with all of you. Dr. Bansal is very much keen to give answer for the question somebody has asked, because he was not on record that time.
Akashi, after thanks, no need to say and give the direct number so that.
Oh, you give him number.
Okay, sir. We will circulate you the question and the contact number of the participants.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much all for the wonderful session. Thank you very much.
अरे भाई शौकीन साहब दादा बन के बधाई